Hey everyone, it's been a while since I had a video on my channel. My class has been talking about Mediapipe in TouchDesigner, so I realized that I didn't have any videos online to help everyone out with that. We're going to be using the plugin by Torin Blankensmith, which is really amazing. First, maybe I just want to give a little overview for beginners of what even this is. So, definition: it's open source cross-platform framework developed by Google. So it's using machine learning and it processes various types of media. Mostly what we've used in TouchDesigner is video, but also is capable of doing audio classification and other processing of sensor data. So we would call it an example of computer vision or CV. If someone has a little bit more of a CS background, Google has all of the documentation online, so anyone can get all this info and develop it into various applications of your own. Of course, this looks pretty complicated for those of us that are coming just from the art world or don't really have any proper experience with more computer science stuff. So this is why this is really great. This plugin by Torin, super helpful and really easy to use. So you can grab it from his GitHub. So that's where we grab this right here. It's got documentation of all of the little settings. So absolutely you should go through and look through all of this, give it a little read to just grab it. Grab this here, download the zip. And when we do that, what comes out is, downloads here. We get the zip, and then inside that folder, there's a lot of stuff here. Mostly what we care about is this Mediapipe TouchDesigner toe that has all the examples, which we'll look at. But more importantly, I think for our own custom projects, these toxes here. So you can use just exactly what you need. Don't use what you don't need. And it's a little more streamlined that way. So grab that, and we're going to look at this first file, Mediapipe, and I just want to highlight, we're going to go through this step of enabling an external TOX. This is going to be important for us. So maybe first let's go into the first example. So this is basically what Torin had provided in that download. I added a few extra little things, little extra comments with some nulls, but at a glance, you can see how many great things that it does. I've got this audio. Let's turn this audio off for a second. We're going to use that a little bit later. It's audio device out. Turn it off. Okay, cool. And we'll go into that. So this has face tracking, hand tracking, pose tracking. This is the main ones that we're going to talk about in this tutorial. I won't really get into it, but also it does object tracking up to, I'm forgetting how many labels, maybe 80 different classes I think it detects. Face detector, image classification, image segmentation is really powerful also, but I'm not going to get into that in this video. One problem that even just yesterday in class some students were having, sometimes when you first load this Mediapipe TouchDesigner toe, you might have some problems with your proper webcam loading, or you might just get the warning error and just a black screen. And so you might wonder why. When you click this, sometimes it only shows the list of webcams that it was saved. Even if it was on a different computer, it'll show that list. So if that happens, what you need to do, first off, you could try hitting reset, and that kind of resets the system. If that doesn't work, go into common, and this is one of the messages that pops up when you first start this is related to this enable external TOX message. So you definitely want to have that on. So if you're having a problem when you first load this toe, things aren't showing up, what I suggest is toggle this off and on, reload it, double check, click this little plus sign, and what you want to do is, so you want to have this folder of TOX files living in the same place as the TOW file that you're working in. So you want to go in and just relink this TOX file here. Hit open, and you can reload, and it's going to reload that again. Taka, taka, taka. Okay, that's working. I don't want OBS virtual camera. I'm using my Femto Bolt. Cool. Okay, and then that should work. The reason why you do this external TOX, just to highlight, if we go into the toxes here, actually, let me go back to my other folder. That's where I'm actually working. TOX files. We can see this Mediapipe TOX is quite heavy. It's 180.1 megabytes. And my TOW I'm working on right now is only less than 300 kilobytes. So what's happening is the Mediapipe data, the plugin itself, is not being loaded inside the TOW file. It is referencing that single TOX spot, which is good. Like in my example, this probably isn't super practical on an actual project. I'm using multiple iterations of that Mediapipe plugin right now. If all of them were actually loaded inside the TOW, then that's 180 megabytes times, it's going to be times 4 at that point. It's going to make your system load really slowly. It's definitely not optimized. So you want to make sure enable external TOX, set to on, and then you have selected the actual Mediapipe TOX right here. Okay, and then things should work. Let's just go through doing that manually. So the second spot is completely empty. So I'm going to just do this from scratch. I'm going to grab in the TOX files. So first grab Mediapipe, and maybe for this one, so here's the little message that comes up, check enable external TOX. And then also I think for this one I'm going to do face tracking. And so when we do that on my Mediapipe, select my camera. Okay, cool. So even though I have now 4 of these running, so I can tell I'm getting 60 frames per second, but my I can tell the Mediapipe itself is super slow right now. So I'm realizing that that's a little bit crazy for me to be running 4 at a time. So let me go in here. I'm going to just make sure these are uncooked. Hit X, okay. And let's hope it works again when I need it to. Okay, back in here. Okay, so this is actually, you don't need to know all the guts that's happening here, but it's a really kind of clever use of using the web browser, web server DATs. I don't understand all that, so I won't get into it, but kudos to Torin for figuring that out. So for the Mediapipe, I decided I want to just play with the face tracking here, so I grabbed the face tracking TOX. So when you do this manually, you need to connect these here, and from the outputs on the Mediapipe container, we can see a few things. So this first DAT, we can see face landmarks. That says hands, that says pose, objects, face detector, images, image embeddings, and that's just video. So I want to connect the face landmarks to your face tracking, and then we can see that is working beautifully. If I wanted to use pose, let's say, I would need to grab the, where is it? Pose tracking TOX, drag that in right there, and make sure I'm dragging from the pose DAT output to that. So you can't see my legs, but they're down there. And then also if you want the output video, this is what we see right here. So typically, if I'm only doing face tracking here, I don't want all the other processing to be running, right? So in the main Mediapipe plugin here, we have lots of different tabs for each functionality. In this main Mediapipe tab, let's actually, you know what? I haven't done that yet. Ooh, let's make sure we do that. Enable, hit plus. Let's go back in. Okay, reload just to Make sure it's grabbing that one. Okay, let's do that one more time. Okay, cool. Now we're better. So I'm only going to be doing face tracking. So this is actually face landmarks is what we want. So I don't need that. Great, okay. So that is working. Beautiful. If you need the output video, if you need to still access the camera, we can show overlays, yes or no. Also, there is a clever trick if you are using some sort of siphon connection. There's a certain amount of latency. So out of this first chop output, this shows you the number of milliseconds, I believe. That is the delay. So there's a way you can make sure that your video feeds are synced up. So that's in the GitHub documentation too, so check that out if you're having trouble somehow with things not syncing up properly. For now, I'm not going to worry about that. And then once you have the TOX working that you want, you can play around with all of these outputs. So that gives us that right there. So I basically just recommend hooking up all of the outputs just to see what's happening. And then we have some SOP outputs also. This would be face mask 1, 2, 3, and 4. So this works up to 4 faces then. On the face landmarks here, max number of faces you can set depending on how many you need. I'll just keep that at 1 for now. These other chops, so these would be transformation matrices, which I don't understand perfectly well, so I'll just leave that. You can look up more on the GitHub documentation. This one I think is very useful. So this gives us all of the, it's kind of a higher semantic meaning for what's happening. So if I can maybe, I'll just put this side by side like that. There we go. So if you see eyes, eyebrows tend to be pretty responsive. If you see this, the channels up here at the top. Mouth is pretty responsive. And jaw. Different types of like pucker, like kissing. So you can play around with these settings. So you basically imagine your face as a type of input control, human-computer interface. So opens up all the world of controlling things in your network with facial expressions. So certain eye blinks left or right. So all that is possible. Really exciting. And then this next chop output is the face points. So on the face we have 479 points. So in chop form we can then use this in our instancing if we want to create instancing. And same thing, we have like 478 points. Oh wait, because we have like one extra sample, then we have points. So that's interesting. So you can use that for instancing, or in the GitHub example, there's also a short example of how to use this for more of like a Snapchat-like face filter. So that's the basics of just getting something working manually to be more streamlined. So I've got a couple of examples here. So for this one, okay, I've got using hand tracking. So as always, I dragged in the hand tracking TOX, connected it to the proper one. And for this one with hands, you can play around with these on your own as well. But I'm using these kind of semantic gestures that are loaded. So these are kind of automatically built into Mediapipe. Let me turn this back on. So the way I have it right now, if I have 2 open palms, that is that, and then 2 closed fists. Okay, yeah, it's a little bit buggy, but you get the picture. So it's really just doing a little chop parsing, grabbing closed fist for both hands, and doing some logic with an and. So both of them closed fists. Yeah, I think because I have so many Mediapipes open, it's slowing down. So don't load 4 instances of the plugin in a single toe. Maybe that's the lesson. That's why it's being a little bit buggy. But essentially, if I have both fists closed, that's triggering this audio file. If both are open palms, that's triggering a different audio file. And then just doing a few tricks here, right? So that's the instancing, which is giving me instances of the hands. And then you might notice if I only have one hand, let's just look at this here. So only one hand. There are 42 samples, so it's 21 points per hand. And if there's only one hand available, the data for the second hand is still there. It's just all zeroed out. So that's something to be aware of. If you could do like a trim chop maybe to get rid of it if needed. And then also in the documentation, if we go down here, let's say for hands. This takes us back to the Google Docs. You could try out all of these straight on the Google website. But one of the cool things is, here we go. So this tells you how it numbers the points on the hands. So sometimes you might need specifically the tips of the fingers. So then it would be, right, sample or index 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, things like that. And same thing goes for if you're doing pose. This tells you, there we go. Here's how the points are numbered on the body. So 33 points total. So definitely a good resource. And then, everything else, nothing too crazy that's happening. So actually, if both are closed fists, all I'm doing is just changing the opacity of that level. And if they're both open palms, it's just a little trick. See with the transform there inside the feedback loop. So nothing too crazy. This last example, wait, let me. Got my hand. Okay. This example, I wanted to play around. It's a little bit more extensive. Using the hand tracking, here we have like all of the points for each finger, X, Y, and Z. So that is super useful. Instancing points again. And this here, so we have the gesture recognition like I showed before. This here shows us, it's called helpers, I believe, this chop. But yeah, helpers. So we have velocity could be really helpful. Distance between hands is really helpful. I'm going to use this pinch midpoint right now, and also pinch distance. So I've got a X, Y, and Z pinch here, which is determining the location of this red dot. And then I also have a distance. So if my fingers are close together, that distance goes down. If my fingers are far apart, that distance goes up. So I can use that to kind of test, if I'm actually pinching. And essentially, there's kind of a lot of chop parsing to do this. But I've got this other little box that is floating around randomly. And this is just to show that this is tracking X, Y, and Z. So there's a certain depth. So you can see it's comparing the Z depth also. Oops, there we go. And another one's coming. You know, just it's killing me. I didn't bother to do sound design because that would take another like few hours, but feel free to make your own noises as you see this. So as you go closer, it gets bigger. As you go farther away, it gets smaller, goes away. And I made it so as the distance is getting closer, it's blinking faster. And once it gets into a target range, there we go. And then when I pinch, it explodes. So this is just really, pretty easy. The Z-axis I find is a little more buggy than the X and Y. But, it's good enough for some simple applications. If you're interested in me going through the details of some of this, I can, let me know in the comments. There's a lot of kind of weird parsing, because essentially, one important thing I had to do was, I always talk about, this data is like clay. You have to shape it into the form that you need. So the XYZ coordinates coming from Mediapipe, essentially on the right side, let's say for X, if you see that, that's about 0.95 all the way on the left side. If I go down here, over there, right, that's 0 basically. So you can see the scale is 0 to 1 on the X. For the Y, that's about 0.95 at the top and about 0 at the bottom. So it also is like 0 to 1. And what's my Z axis? So pretty close. That's weirdly, it's like negative 0.1. Back here, it's about negative 0.03. So you have to understand your ranges. And then for my cube, so in the kind of world space, if we look at geometry viewer, right, there's my cube floating around. I have to map the Mediapipe space onto this world geometry space. So you have to understand what kind of math chop rearranging you need to do for that. And that just takes some finessing. You have to work with that a little bit. And then one extra little dynamic ranging I had to do was the X and Y ranging is different depending on where you are in Z space. So if you imagine the camera's here, so it's travels differently on the X and Y than if you were Z, pretty far back. So this extra little spot here is essentially finding out where we are in the Z space on the Z axis, and then changing the range values for TX and TY based on what our Z value is. So a lot of kind of finagling, a lot of finessing of the chops. But I think overall, it's just kind of showing the power of using this plugin. Pretty cool. All right, thanks.